Hello, my name is Emilio. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to Joanne for putting on such a great show and everyone here at the Nerman Museum. Thank you to Lisa Chadwick of Dolby Chadwick Gallery in San Francisco, who I work with, show with. I've been showing with Lisa for 2 years now, or I guess just over a year. But it's been an amazing journey so far, and I can't be happier. So thank you, and thanks to my family. My dad's here, my grandmother, my wife Michelle, and then my best friend Jason, and David and Violaine. So thank you guys for being here. So the title of my work. Oh, and I'm really honored to be included with Giants, Joel, and Gabriel, so thank you guys. Congratulations to you too. My show's Everything is Something. And so I'm going to start with the slide first from, this is the view from the window in our kitchen in North Beach of San Francisco. Every time someone visits our apartment, they look at the window and everyone says, "Why don't you paint that?" And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, you don't think I've already thought about that? And, but it's true, it's just this daunting view every single day. I look at it, I look at the cityscape, and so this is looking, you can see Lombard Hill right there on the right. If you're not familiar with Lombard Hill, it's that windy, hilly road. So I guess it's still considered North Beach. To the right is SFAI, which is very torturous for me to look at every day because I did not get accepted to that school. And there's a beautiful Diego Rivera mural there, and amazing painters went to that school. And then, so yeah, anyways, this is the view from our window. And so we moved there in 2021. We scored with pandemic prices, which was amazing. And I think about this view every single morning because I sit there and that's where I eat my breakfast, drink my coffee, and I just look out the window, and it's, you know, the weather changes and whatnot. So it's never gets boring. And so this is Gerhard Richter. I want to say that first. A lot of the talk in my work has to do with San Francisco. You know, I love living in San Francisco. I've been there since 2008. And I love the art that is in San Francisco. And this particular painter, Gerhard Richter, is one of my favorite painters. German painter, I believe born in Germany. I'm not too sure. But his work, like mine, has evolved over the years. Like if you look at my work from 10 years ago, you almost won't even be able to recognize that I painted it. And with Gerhard Richter, he had so many different genres and evolutions in his work. The connection here with San Francisco is this painting is in the SF MoMA. And this is on, I believe it's the 5th or 6th floor, but as soon as you exit the elevator, it's the first painting you see when you get off the elevator. And I took my father a couple of years ago to the museum, and only to this floor. And when he got out of the elevator, I told him, like, just hold here for a second. He's like, okay. And then I'm like, all right, keep getting a little closer and closer. So he kept walking like 10 feet closer and closer. And then finally, when he gets up to the front, his face just lit up. And he's like, oh my God. And it's just a bunch of brushstrokes. So it transforms. And this painting has been very special to me. I think I remember telling people that it was my favorite painting in the SF MoMA around 2016, 2017. So this combined with the window view from my apartment, and that's how I created, that's where the Everything is Something painting sort of came from. And the one thing, I think the reason I was fighting the image of or the view from the window for so long is I didn't want to just recreate it literally. And I can't really explain, it wasn't so like A to B. It was an evolution that led to this work, but while I was painting it, I was thinking about the window and the Gerhard Richter painting. And I'll talk about the individual objects a little later, and the color palette as well. But I just wanted to show a comparison here. This is a little trick I do for my friends at the bar. So here's a black and white copy of the painting you just saw, and then here's the Gerhard Richter again. So not a literal landscape, and also Madrid is one of my favorite places in the world, so it just happened to work out that way too. I thought that was cool. But you can, if you imagine it looks, to me it feels like some sort of cityscape. So these two images I have up here because these are the first attempts at creating some sort of skyline, essentially, like a horizon line, where the other ones were almost aerial looking down. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard to look at these paintings because the paintings take so long to make. They take about 8 weeks to paint, and I don't even know if I like them, if that makes sense. So, and it takes so long for them to dry as well, and seeing them up in the room upstairs against the white walls, I was so scared to show up today, but I was so pleased with the presentation. But yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it takes so long to create, and I haven't been making them for so long, so I'm still learning how to make them, and I'm just still deciding whether I like them or not. But I do love painting them, which I think is the most important part. So a couple of other sprinkling in some other influences. This again it says New York City 2 by Mondrian. This is actually at the SF MoMA as well. I had a teacher that told me once, and this stuck with me forever. And he said that Europe has, in terms of museums, Europe has the filet mignon of art museums, artwork. New York has the prime rib, and San Francisco has the Spam of the art world. So we have really good artists, but we have sort of the B-sides of the good artists. So what really fascinated me about this painting is that it's not even a painting, it's all tape. So it's there, when you went up to it, it's just all tape marks. So it's unfinished, formerly New York City 3. And Mondrian is someone I don't ever look up. I don't look at his images online. I don't have a Mondrian book, or maybe I do. But there's something that always attracts me. Anytime I'm at a museum and I see a Mondrian piece, I have to walk over to it. I have to go up close to it. And I'm just drawn to the grid. Maybe I'm forever stuck in the 20th century. And then the next artist who I'm really inspired by right now is Stanley Whitney. And again, Stanley Whitney, like Mondrian, obviously grid, using pretty intense colors. And what was I going to say? So with Stanley Whitney, I discovered him. Here's the SF tie to this painting. Is there was a Joan Mitchell show a couple of years ago at the SF MoMA, and there was a 4-minute YouTube video from the MoMA about Joan Mitchell's work, and when I clicked it, it was Stanley Whitney, who I'd never heard of, and he talked about her work. And usually I'm a little reluctant to hear some, like a short little clip of someone who probably, I don't know, I didn't know who Stanley Whitney was, so I was like hesitant, and then I just immediately fell in love with his work. And the way he talked about Joan Mitchell, I'm like, man, this guy sounds like a painter. And then I looked at his work, and I just went down the rabbit hole. He has a few interviews on YouTube. And what struck me about, well, I kept going back to them. I kept playing the interviews while I was painting instead of music. And what I took from him that influenced my works was that for years, he battled with the subject matter. And he was always going to the studio and battling what to paint. And so he decided to paint in this style. And so creating this style for him, it was easy, not easy, painting's not easy, but it was easy for him to go to the studio and just put the work in and then leave. And that to me, I guess I'm just obviously not doing his lecture justice, but it was really inspiring to me. And I took that to my studio, and that sort of fueled the direction of the work ethic for the Everything is Something pieces. So here are a couple of details from the paintings, close-ups. And now I'm going to talk a bit more about the individual subject matter. Subject matter can be, again, anything found in our apartment. I paint a lot of portraits of Michelle, my wife, my friend Jason, and objects laying around in the apartment or on my walks to the art store or to my studio. And it's one of those things when I'm like walking to the art store, if I see a crushed water bottle on the floor, I walk really fast. So I'll like walk by it, and then in my head, I'm like, you should take a picture of that. And then by the time I'm already like almost a block down, I have to run back and take a photo. And so I think I'm just a little stubborn in that, but I'm glad I go back and take the photos. So this is actually, here's another one. Here's an example of a portrait that's in one of the Everything is Something paintings. And another influence that I'll talk about in a little bit too are the Bay Area figurative painters who actually painted at SFAI and taught at SFAI and attended SFAI. David Park, Richard Diebenkorn, Elmer Bischoff, Paul Warner, I don't think attended the school, but he was part of that crew. Joan Brown. And objects from my studio, that's my painting desk thing, I don't know what you call them, rollers. And then this painting is in the show, and that's a painting of me and Michelle in the studio. Michelle picked up painting last year, so she's a really good painter, and just picked up painting out of nowhere. And since we've met, we've been going to museums nonstop, and for the last 10 years, she's been, every time we're at a museum, she'll look at some paintings, and she'll be like, if I were to paint, I would paint like that. And so her schooling was just going to the museums and looking at the art and soaking up the art there. And it's incredible to see her transform and create the work that she's been creating lately. But this is somewhat more of an imaginative scene. That red table exists. That red table is under the view of the window from the first slide. There's my red table. That red chair I don't think exists. Little paint tubes in the corner, and an imaginary painting up top. This is David Park, he was a teacher at SFAI, and really my introduction to the Bay Area figurative painters. I read a book by Nancy Boas, a great book on David Park called A Painter's Life. And this was, I believe, one of his earlier pieces, and his story is really great. He didn't arrive to this stage in his life until, years of exploring with other directions. His work as well evolved a lot. He was never satisfied, and as soon as he exhausted something, he was on to the next thing. And I think I found, maybe that's where I got that red chair from now, I'm noticing. But color palette, as well as not just figurative, but a grid. There's a clear grid here, or at least he creates his own grid. And I think that's what I always find fascinating in a lot of these of my heroes. And just like the little quirky, like how he cut off the figure's head on the left and the arm, but he still kind of squeezed it all in there. And there's moments of Vuillard in this painting, I believe. Bonnard, I think those painters were really influential. Also, Edvard Munch is a big influence in the Bay Area. I think there was a retrospect of his exhibition of his works in 1940, I believe, in San Francisco, and all those painters attended that show for sure. And as well as Diego Rivera and Matisse were huge influences on the Bay Area painters. This is one of my paintings that I had at Lisa's gallery last year, and just pulling it up to show, again, going back to that Stanley Whitney, Mondrian, even the David Park color palette. I always tell people that I'm more of a meat and potatoes kind of painter. Like I only need 2 colors, black and white, to create a piece. And if I start using more colors, I get confused. So I try to keep it simple. And yeah, the texture just became a part of the work, influenced extremely by David Park and I think mostly Joan Brown. Here's another example of figurative work with a grid as well, a little looser, featuring Jason's motorcycle, which he told me I painted backwards, which I didn't even know that. I guess it's like as if you were looking at the wheel on the right side of the car. And that's his helmet, which started out as a portrait of him, but then selfishly I painted myself. And then I think this might be the last slide. Oh, no, I got a couple more, sorry. So these are the works on paper. There's some works on paper in the room. And I started painting acrylic on paper a couple of years ago, and I keep telling people I just want to paint acrylic. A, oil paint is too expensive, and B, it never dries. And with acrylic paper, I find myself being able to create paintings that become more surreal because of the speed that I'm painting at. I don't really think about it. And when oil paintings, they take 8 weeks sometimes, you start to overthink it and you start to second guess, and I'm already really insecure. So working with something for eight weeks, it's brutal. And also what's nice about the acrylic on paper is that that make them so fast, and they also help inform the oil paintings. So this will tie back into the other painting. This is another acrylic piece of the same painting that we saw earlier with me and Michelle, but you could see the difference in how much more surreal it can become. And, I don't think about it as a presentable piece necessarily. And even though I have this hanging in our apartment, it's my favorite piece of mine. I don't usually say that about my work, but for some reason, I think the acrylics, I always like them just because of how loose and in the moment and genuine they feel. And yeah, I don't even know how a floating car ended up in there. But then there's what looks like a garage, I suppose, and then my little fake Paul Warner tree in the corner. And yeah, I don't know where that face came from in terms of style or aesthetic or design direction. I don't know. But the stripes I have a striped shirt that looks just like that. But the Diebenkorn, if you look at Diebenkorn's paintings at David Park, they use so many stripes in their works, and stripes just look cool, I guess. I don't know. And then, one thing from Allison's paper, she mentioned this portrait being shirtless, and when I read it, I was like, wow, I didn't realize I painted it shirtless, but it totally makes sense of just the vulnerability and the just painting and just, I guess having the piece out there for people to look at and I guess judge or not judge or whatever. But I thought that was really cool in the paper. It made me think and look at this painting completely differently, and the way that Michelle's painted it in it as well. Like she is so confident in her painting, like just direct, straight line painting, and I'm like wonky and wobbly in the front. I think that's my last slide. So thank you.